Namaskar everyone and good morning. It is absolutely such joy for me to be here amongst all of you today and to wake up in Imphal and know that I'm going to be meeting all of you. It is absolutely overwhelming to know that you've come on a Sunday, you've come when it's not really greatly pleasant weather. I'm standing in a good spot, sir, so I might take a few minutes more. but you know, I really am very grateful, and it really is very overwhelming. My joy to meet you is slightly, maybe half-hearted, because I understand the circumstances that we are meeting in. These are not ideal circumstances, and the gravity of the situation, I can assure you, is not lost on me. But we must make the best of the opportunities that we have, and for this opportunity, I have Manipur University to thank. I have Dr. Noni for thinking of me and inviting me for this dialogue to thank. And to all the brilliant speakers I have heard over the course of 2 days, I have learned so much. But I think most importantly, the fact that I have this opportunity to be here at this very crucial juncture is supremely important to me. Because like they say, when you share joy, joy doubles. And when you share sorrow, sorrow becomes half of what it is. And I hope that my presence here today is an assurance to you that my support and my commitment to this cause is unwavering. But apart from the support that, of course, you have of mine, I'm actually quite baffled because I don't really know what I can give you, offer you, especially after I am a part of a panel of such luminaries. I can only learn from them, I can only learn from their experience, and they're brilliant, brilliant ideas. I may not agree with all of them, but I am sure you will forgive me for that, sir. Chairperson, with your permission, I would now like to address the talk. The talk given to me today is what is the way ahead? This is a very, very complex question. And it's a more complex question for me, because to me, really the stakeholders of solution, the stakeholders of this land are the people who are standing here. You have the solutions, you know what the future should be, you know what you want to leave your next generations. But before we discuss what the way ahead is, I'd like to, and you know, I've been given this privilege to be able to address you, and you've given me this privilege of your time. So, in my humble capacity, before I address what the way ahead would be, I'd like to put in a little caveat that I do very often. Many of you who may have heard me before have seen this at the beginning of my talks or at the end of my talks, and I usually place it just so that I can let you know my position. And my position is that I am not an expert. I don't know everything about the Northeast. I don't know everything about Manipur. And to me, the idea of somebody being an expert is a sad idea, because that sort of indicates that there's a finality to what you know, that there's nothing more to learn. And with my years of commitment to my studies in the Northeast, which, by the way, is not supported by anybody, is only supported by myself. With that commitment, I have to say that I'm just a learner, and forgive me for what you don't agree with me, and accept me for what I have to offer. The way ahead, as I see, for Manipur is not an easy one. It's not a short one. The road ahead is long and it's difficult. But I do feel that we have the wherewithal to withstand the times that we are going through. We have the wherewithal to come out with logical solutions, to come out with some sort of ideas that are common to both parties. But before I get into that, I want to address a few things. I want to take advantage of the fact that you're here. I may not be an expert, but I have spent a considerable amount of time. I've spent a considerable amount of energy, and I've spent a considerable amount of resources to know that there are anxieties. And there are a lot of anxieties that come across to me. Ever since this conflict started, I have had thousands of messages that come to me, if not hundreds, every single day. I have met representations from both communities. I have met people. I have been in dialogue. This is everything apart from the work that I have to do. I have engaged as much as I can. I have lived, I have breathed, and I have only thought about this, as have all of you. But in all of these discussions, there are a couple of strains that I have figured, and these strains come from certain misconceptions. And sometimes when you're within, a situation, maybe you're too close to the situation wherein that has an emotional impact, and I'm sure it does. But I'd like to clarify those misconceptions today. Ladies and gentlemen, the first misconception that I come across and I'd like to clear is what I hear very often from young people, older people alike. They say that we have lost the war of narrative. You've not lost the war of narrative. You have made the narrative. Today, the rest of the country knows more about Manipur than they ever knew before. You have risen like the phoenix rises from the ashes. You've made a bad situation maybe work for you. Today, the country knows about the unfair land distribution in this state, something that they never did. Today, this country knows about infiltration, and that infiltration today they've realized is not just from Bangladesh, but from across the state, from Myanmar and from other such troubled regions. That point of view has changed, and they've come to realize the impact of this sort of infiltration. They've come to realize the demographic change. How do I know this? Because I live outside Manipur. People are talking about this, people are writing about this. This has become even a part of the Delhi social chatterati. That says a lot. But what they've also understood, and I think that's really important, and this is, really, this has nothing to do with free speech. But they've also realized that you can't take Manipur lightly, that journalism cannot be peddled as propaganda, and that there will be consequences. And I think that is something very important, because that builds counter-narratives. Number two, the other anxiety that I've noticed across platforms is the fact that nobody cares, that the country doesn't care. Ladies and gentlemen, that again is a misconception. I have never seen the country talk so much about the situation in Manipur. I remember in 2007 or 2008, there was a low-intensity bomb blast in Imphal, in ISKCON temple, I think. The first time it showed up in Delhi was on page 2 or 3 a couple of days later. Today there are media channels that are running this for weeks, for months, and are continuing following it. And I think that says something about the interest that it has garnered. At least we're not being ignored any longer. The media channels also today have an interest in maybe looking at the situation deeper and understanding the nuances of it. That again, in my opinion, is a victory. But more than that, India has realized the strategic importance of Manipur. Many people didn't. You'll be surprised. We spoke about it loosely. We spoke about Northeast being very important to India and it being an integral part of our country and that it was ignored. But did we go into the details of it? No, we didn't go into the details of it. Did we know what was so important about it? No, we didn't know what was so important about it. But today, people realize the strategic value of Manipur, not just in the Northeast, but its strategic value to the future of this country. Manipur is not just the gateway to Southeast Asia. It is the golden gateway for India's future ambitions to be a balancing power between the East and the West. But beyond that also, the humanitarian impact that I have seen, I've always found, and forgive me for generalizing, but I've always found that our country has been a little hesitant in moving towards a little bit of relief work or giving donations. But this time when people heard that I was coming to Imphal, I was so touched. There was not a single colleague, a single friend who didn't want to be a part of the relief work. Everybody wanted to do their bit. And that tells me a lot. But there is one third and final anxiety that I've seen in absolutely everyone. Everyone who messages me, everyone who calls me. That anxiety is of maintaining territorial integrity. Again, ladies and gentlemen, now that it has drawn upon us that the territorial integrity of Manipur is extremely important, not just for other people, not just for, the country, but because of the kind of attachment you have to the land of Manipur. That has not gone unnoticed. Therefore, the question of territorial integrity, in my assessment of the situation, any changes will never happen. And the reason it will never happen is because this nation realizes that today it's not dealing with just the territorial integrity of Manipur, it is dealing with the territorial integrity of India. But let me ask you this, and play devil's advocate. What is territorial integrity? If today you can't leave the valley, and people from other places cannot come into the valley, what does it mean to you in the larger context? These are difficult questions that we must answer for ourselves. Territorial integrity just does not mean a legal bifurcation. It means so much more. It means the access, let alone you. I think most of you here would not advise me to leave the valley. And that says something very deep to me and very disturbing to me. But of course, this is a country that is known for its a state that is known for its diversity, its inclusiveness. And of course, the country is known for its diversity and inclusiveness. And that spirit seems to be lost today. But let me also say this, that when we talk about diversity and inclusiveness, and it obviously has become a very popular topic to talk about, it makes us feel good about ourselves. Diversity and inclusiveness also has limitations. It also has to follow certain rules and regulations. And without the rule of law, diversity and inclusiveness can take a shape that will not going to suit any one of us. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to dialogue. Now, it's very easy, and I know my colleagues have given a great exposition on what should be done, but here's my problem with it. When you ask me, how do we go ahead? Yeah, simply I can say, I can say disarm, I can say disengage, and I can say dialogue. But who's going to disarm? Is anybody going to disarm? There is no trust. One party is going to say that, I'm not going to surrender my weapons until he does. The other person is going to say, I'm not going to surrender my weapons until he does. Yesterday, we had a very interesting talk where somebody spoke about state responsibility. I agree with that. The state has to have responsibility and the state has to have accountability. But let me talk about individual accountability and individual responsibility. And I think that becomes the crux of it. How do we use individual responsibility? Because that's all we can do. How do we use individual responsibility in building the kind of trust that we need to go into dialogue. Disarming, disengaging, dialogue are second stage developments. Your first stage development is to be able to sit across the table, or at least to bring the invested parties to the table. That itself is a problem today. So there are very simple things that I've noticed. One of the things I've noticed that creates mistrust, that creates this lack of initiative to engagement, is the peddling of fake news. And, I'm not going to blame one community over the other, but there is fake news that's floating around. People are quoting that fake news that is building certain sort of imageries in people's heads. And the kind of material that is going around, let me tell you, a lot of the talks, a lot of the debates, not many people are actually seeing the full thing. We might think that they're seeing the full thing. They aren't, and I'll give you an example of it. I get a lot of wonderful messages, which I love reading. I get some really nasty ones, which I don't like so much. Sometimes I'm really, really happy to engage when I have the time. I don't have a lot of time to engage with everybody who contacts me. Sometimes I'm also a little mischievous. I'm a little bored and I want to engage with the ones that don't like me really a lot. And sometimes when I've done that because I can feel a certain amount of irrationality. I can feel a certain amount of pain. I'm no one to judge who's been through what. But I'll give you an example. Somebody messaged me the other day and was very angry at me. I had been on a debate with this lady. And he said, oh, we didn't like the way you spoke. And, this is very upsetting for us. And never show your face to me again. I said, yeah, all right, I'll let the news channels know. So then he said, but you're bigoted. So I said, why do you say that? So he said, I say that because you never defend us, you're biased towards one community. So I said, okay, why am I biased? Can you give me a couple of examples? So he said, you're biased because, you don't take our side and you don't think about our grievances. So I said, you watch all my talks? He said, yeah. I said, you watch all my debates? He said, yeah. I said, are you sure? He said, yeah. So I said, in every debate of mine, and every talk of mine, I have said that we have to find common space and we have to cede space. It's not going to be easy and we have to decide what space we want to cede. But that is the kind of temperament we need to come on the table with, and therefore, if there are questions on development, if those are community anxieties, then we need to look into them. So he said, okay. But, I don't like the fact that you don't care about our security. When those two women, that video released, it was terrible because you didn't say anything. I said, I didn't say anything. On national TV, I said, not only should the people, the perpetrators be caught, but the observers and the people taking the videos should be caught. So he says, okay. So I said, all right, what else? So he says, I don't think you should smile. I said, what do you mean? He said, you should have seen the debater's face and it fell, and when you smile, it looks like you know too much. I said, okay, I can do that. I won't smile if that makes you feel better. But I said, let me show you something. So I don't usually save the nasty messages that come from me, and I've not been raised in the manner where I can actually repeat what is said to me. I neither choose to make it my victim card, but yeah, I do take a couple of screenshots. So I sent the screenshots to him. And I said, so you were talking about grievances, and you were talking about being bigoted, and you were talking about hate. It comes both ways. And the difference here is, I'm not pulling out the victim card. I'm not putting this, this diatribe together and putting it up on social media and saying, come, save me. Look what a community is doing. I don't sit there demonize and generalize the characteristics of what may be just of the fringe element. I always give credit to the fact that we will always have fringe elements in all communities. And that's the reality of life. But that does not mean that the whole community is like that. Anyhow, that was my example of how social media works and how we really aren't truthful to what we are reading. There is intellectual fraudulence. Number 2, curtailing anger. I think you want to build trust. There's a certain way to dialogue. And I'm not just saying this to the people in this room, The fact that you're here means you're open-minded enough to want to listen to me. But I'm saying this to the general public that has gotten involved in this conflict. One is pitted against the other, nasty things are said, women are targeted. It's completely unhinged. What purpose it solves, I have no idea. Nobody is really making policies based on the abuses that are being hurled back and forth. Complete waste of time. Number 3, thinking long term. Everything that I read on social media, everything that I read in, the documents that are being sent to me is all about this one did this, that happened. Have you ever heard of the term the Gordon's knot? Gordon's knot. So the Gordon's knot is an interesting concept because it was put forth to Alexander, and it was this most complicated knot that nobody could unravel. And the person who would unravel it would be able to rule all of Asia, so as they said. So instead of unraveling it, Alexander sorted the problem out by taking his sword out and cutting it through. This is the need of the hour. You cannot keep going back and saying this happened, that happened. I am not absolutely saying that emotions don't run high and the pain is not real. But I'm just saying, if you're talking about the way forward, that way forward is not going to come from the past. It's going to come from the present, your actions today. And that is what is going to make you a roadmap that is strong enough to not give you artificial peace, to give you long-term peace. If you want artificial peace, many ways to have it. Have a dialogue, take out a document, say, happy, 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 joy, joy, joy. Come back to stage 1, a year down the line, 5 years down the line. Because that is not really the issue. We have to take the bull by its horns. And how is that going to happen? Now, this is what I want to say. The 3 areas that are really important is to disarm, is to disengage, and to dialogue. Now, what does disarm mean? Disarm means giving up your weapons. We know that's not going to happen. But how is it going to happen? You want to put the responsibility on the state? The state is not going to be able to do it because people are not going to be willing to surrender. For them, that is their anxiety. So what you need to do is you need to concentrate on the dialogue. These are all interconnected. You need to concentrate on what really is going to allow them to come to the table, build that trust and say, okay, even if it's one person. How many of us have tried that? It's difficult, it's inconvenient, and it's ugly because you don't know what abuses will be hurled at you. But you've got to do what you've got to do, and you've got to work the tough routes to come out in the end victorious. Number 2, disengage. What do I mean by disengage? A lot of people say, oh, I was talking to this person, he doesn't see my point of view. My friends say, one person called me up and said, I called up a friend of mine and I asked him, what are you doing? And he said, I'm hunting. I won't take the name of the tribe. This sort of disengagement has to happen. If people are not going to be rational, there's no point. What are you going to do by convincing them? They're neither decision makers, they're maybe in pain and not in the right sense of their minds. So, what is going to happen with that? Not much. So you need to be able to disengage, but you need to be able to disengage with the right optics. I don't think anybody is thinking about the optics. Now, by optics, I mean, if somebody was, let's say, if somebody wanted to take a rally out, it would make pretty good optics if the people that they were going to meet were possibly standing there more in a welcoming gesture than in an aggressive stance. These are the kind of optics that you need to focus on because the world is visual today. You're going to write 300 pages of report, nobody's going to read it. You're going to put the right optics out, people are going to see it. But those optics also have to be hinged on positive foundations. Finally, dialogue. Now this is a difficult one, even for me, because how do you dialogue? If there's no trust, if we're not letting go of the past, what are we going to do? We are going to, like I said, have an artificial peace. But not if we really get down to the nitty-gritties of it. You want to talk about, we'll put a curfew and we'll start small scale engagement. It's not going to help. You need to understand what are the issues that are important to you. In my understanding, the core issue is the land issue. The core issue is land distribution, and the core issue 20 years from now is going to be the same thing if it's not resolved today. And when that happens, I don't think the situation is going to be like this. It might be far more prolonged. So when we are going into dialogue, we go into dialogue with some amount of realistic base, with some amount of understanding that we have to cede space, but the other also has to cede space. We have to find common ground. And we have to find common ground not because, with this feeling that, we are letting go of, what is important to us. No, common ground, keeping the long-term future in mind. You can keep thinking about short-term. You can keep thinking about what's going to happen in the next 1 month. Yeah, now there's relative peace. No, now there are skirmishes. No, the answers will come from your understanding of what you want long-term. And like I said at the very beginning, nobody knows that better than you. But if you were to ask my humble opinion, I would say start with land reforms. Understand what your land reforms are. Understand the legalities of it. And other communities will have to find common ground to understand what this means to you. Because 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I can tell you Imphal Valley is probably going to be unlivable. And if you're going to start thinking about long-term plans there, it might be too late. But apart from that, I did talk about the Gordian knot. Make a clean start. Make a clean start based on common concerns, based on the fact that you have this unique culture that has always accepted diversity. That's what interested me about Manipur in the first place. That the merger of the kind of cultures that happen, it has never happened anywhere in the country where mergers of cultures and religions was completely peaceful. There was always resistance. But in Manipur, it created a greater hybrid culture. In the spirit of that, in the memory of that, is what the dialogue needs to happen. But let me make it a little bit more pinpointed. And of course, we can discuss this later and we can discuss this in detail. But my moderator, sir, here is very strict. So I don't want to give him any opportunity to interject. So while I'm closing, let me say this. I think it is important to consider that if the problem is development, then the answers have to come from solutions that address development. Not separate states, not territorial change, but development. And how does that happen? It happens, and honestly, I don't know how the whole dialogue has changed because that seemed to be the concern earlier on and now the concern seems to be something else. But if that is really the concern, then our incentive has to be development-based. And development, initiatives can be very easily taken, let me just throw the suggestion out there, maybe, giving more powers to ADCs, maybe some amount of legislative power, financial power, let people be answerable to their own decisions and choices. Let that happen. But this is a decision for you to make. I don't have a stakeholding in this state. The second thing, I think, and I have to say that these suggestions that I'm making have come out of discussions and deliberations with other people as well. So this is not just, me brainstorming and saying this is what you should do. But I think it is also important to be able to have populations in areas that, today may be completely isolated towards only one. Maybe that can come through, and again, this is just a suggestion, can come through with the creation of maybe special economic zones in places like Moreh and other areas in Churchandpur that will encourage people to come and settle there, that will give employment, that will give some sort of incentive. And who should be against that? Anybody who has the best of Manipur in mind, anybody who cares for the future of Manipur, cannot really have a reasonable objection to this. And if there is an objection, my friends, there is a problem. Finally, I think the problem is how open-minded we are. How open-minded we are to say that, okay, the past is a past. We can entertain these ideas based on the fact that, it is for the benefit of the state, and at least it begins a dialogue. But ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, I want to say this, that this dialogue, and in solely my opinion, can only happen with the understanding of and with the foundation of the fact that dissent cannot be anarchy, that propaganda cannot be termed as journalism, and that finally, privilege cannot be bigoted and one-sided. So with that, my friends, thank you very much.